Order that works. Introduction and Part 1. The Heterosexual Order. As humans continue to stray farther from the Creator, we soon become deluded by seducing ideologies and enticing notions that seem logical and or feasible from our perspective, but in reality and practicality are non-durable and many times very stressful to manage. We on this revolting path are thus plagued with immense ignorance and a growing and seared reprobate mind regarding the true order in nature created by our Maker, which surrounds us all. We therefore as a consequence walk against its laws, thus resulting to struggles, difficulties and eventually pains and regrets, as a ship sailing contrary to the currents and tides of the sea in the stormy weather. I have since cowered from putting the subject that we are about to discuss strongly before the public view for obvious reasons, as it will definitely not augur well with many persons and evidently contravene the set appalling mainstream ideals and or standards oft pushed and propagated by influential global entities, principally via media and of course other means in many societies of our present generation. These destructive, mass infectious behavioral and mental corruptions, aka evil agendas, are oft preemptively birthed alongside many coinages to serve as a verbal shield or defense, backed and or powered by public criticism, shaming and or humiliation, aimed at silencing the bitter and hard but needed truth expedient for positive and beneficial change. Reprimands that are sadly often termed judgmental and or brash. Thus, in a world that has significantly gone off the tracks of righteousness, there is always at every corner a forceful push for irrational political correctness, which in reality translates to imposed tolerance towards maligning mannerisms and a world that directly or indirectly compels acceptance of evil as good, hence incrementally blurring the lines between right and wrong and or clear definitions, thereby making right and wrong subjective rather than being objectively subject to the commands of our Creator. Also, making it almost impossible to righteously reprove another absent implication, intense negative emotional response and or offense. Although I have fled this topic, nevertheless, I must discuss owing to its urgent importance. The only order that works is a multifaceted subject. Thus, permit me to commence with the first facet, which is the heterosexual order. In this, I shall shed some light on some points and logic which I ideally think should be common sense to any rational, mentally stable and properly thinking being. Let me start by saying that families were birthed by the union of a man and a woman, that is, the heterosexual union, and the world was birthed by nations, and nations were birthed by the expansions of families. At this stage, I presume that the point I am about to hammer heavily on is speedily becoming evident. For the aforesaid is the only union that can bring forth life, and thus continue the posterity of mankind. Besides God, we should as a matter of fact owe our continual existence to this established order set by our Creator, that is the heterosexual union, which without, humanity will grow extinct, And as a matter of fact, we would have never been here long enough in the first place to act out boldly or consider this homosexual societal foolishness. Thus, any behavior or union contrary to that of the heterosexual should be looked upon and treated as a cancer to humanity. And as with all cancers, if not halted, that is, cut off in its early stages, will certainly grow beyond control and eventually bring forth death to our species. And even if one is a type that seeks to use the speculative hypothesis, power or exploits of science and or technology, that imposes many false and contradictory assertions, often unfounded, to argue this point, that is, the indispensability of the masculine and feminine gender consummating to birth human life, it will still be at all times null and void, as technology and science are still and will always be highly subject to and dependent on existing elements in nature to replicate and or create complex or new elements, especially life forms. In this case, beings, and more precisely, human beings. Thus, within this realm of discussion, the foolish wisdom of man's unethical scientific ventures and experiments that attempts to play God, denying the power of the Creator and dabbling in the forbidden and abominable, many times incorporated with high-level sorcery and evils in an attempt to create life, is still firstly immensely dependent on the existence of the spermatozoa of the male and the eggs of the female. Also, technology, even at this dependent attained height, would have never gotten to this point without the time, knowledge acquisition, constant development, or incremental improvement and joint contributions that stems from many generations. Factors that are extremely dependent on the continual existence of human life, which can only be birthed from the union of a man and a woman. Thus, putting it simply, the homosexual union threatens and is against life. Hence, it is no marvel that in many ancient civilizations, such mannerisms at some point in time within certain cultures were treated as capital offenses. And to be frank, such severe penalties are naturally and or logically not far-fetched nor unjust, as even in scientific studies, organisms switch to utter defense mode when individual life and or the collective existence of their species are threatened, automatically triggering the kill or be killed instincts and or reflexes. A mechanism or trait that can be found and witnessed from the greatest to even microscopic organisms. Thus, if this plague is left to spread and or fester, it will surely annihilate the human race, rendering our species over time extinct. By this, nature evidently reveals the truth of order. Hence, we are without excuse when calamity falls heavily as a consequence of overlooking or tolerating this transgression and or maintaining continual defiance. Also, on the spiritual side, we risk being damned to God's righteous judgment and wrath.